Howdy, folks. Welcome to another episode of DevOps Diaries. What an absolute treat and absolute pleasure I have in store today to be able to bring you the wonderful, charismatic Nadina Lisbon. Nadina, thank you for joining us on DevOps Diaries.
Thank you so much for having me, Jack.
You are very welcome. It is absolutely my pleasure to have you on here. I've done a bit of an intro for you already for the listeners as to a little bit of who you are. But you're somebody in the ecosystem with an absolutely incredible journey. What you've achieved is truly amazing, and the accomplishments keep rolling on one on top of the other, one on top of the other, and it's a really inspiring journey. For the listeners, from your perspective, I'd love to hear your take on your journey and give them a little bit of a feel for who you are and what you've done. So, tell us a little bit about that journey for you, Nadina.
Yeah, sure. My name is Nadina Lisbon. I'm a Salesforce CTA. I work as a CRM enterprise architect at NetApp. I also do a lot of things in the community. So I'm a Salesforce MVP, a MuleSoft ambassador, or ladies, the Architect Well ambassador. I do RAD coaching as well, and I co-lead the Frederick user group for architects in Maryland. And yeah, my journey has been a very interesting one. I've been in the ecosystem for about 10 years now. I recently got my CTA last year, and that was definitely a labor of love. It was about 2 years.
Yeah, the CTA preparation and exam itself is no joke for those that are familiar with it, and the level of effort that's required it is intense. I think is probably the best word to describe
Yeah,
it. Um,
very intense.
yeah, absolutely. That CTA journey, Nadina. Um, how did that come about, and how did that become a vision for you of something that you wanted to achieve and strive for?
Yeah, as I was going through my career, so I started as a developer and I've always been thinking about the big picture. I love solving big problems. And as I've been going through my career and looking at architecture in general, CTA was something where it was, oh, this is an amazing achievement and one that brings about so much trust and confidence when you hear that, a CTA is on the project or you're speaking to a CTA, you know that they've seen a lot, know a lot, and have done a lot. And so, one of the things when I was looking at the journey in 2020 is I wanted to start getting ready for this journey. And now, this was before the pandemic. It was one of those things where I felt like it was the time to start. And so, that began my journey. And then 2 years later, I got the CTA. Actually, in November, it'll make a year.
That's incredible. The word COVID is still very prevalent in our lives and kind of making a resurgence now. We're recording this in the middle of October 2023, and it seems to be doing the rounds again, especially post Dreamforce and what have you. But it's always amazing to me when I hear people that really did make the most of that initial time back in 2020 to
Yeah.
elevate themselves in their careers, and that's really cool that you decided to do that at that time.
Yeah, it definitely was, I guess, the right time when I was thinking about it. COVID hadn't started yet. And then now looking back at it, it seems like it was the perfect time to be studying because with the lockdown, with everyone, there was a lot of uncertainty, and just having that overarching goal and something to thrive for really helped me through it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Having a goal and an objective in anybody's career, I guess, is hyper important to getting the most out of it, and that belief. Something about that though, you've mentioned at the start when you were introducing yourself, the number of groups that you're affiliated with and the work that you do in the community, which you shine a light on everybody. The amount of work that you do for community was, I think, really highlighted when Dreamforce this year you got your golden hoodie and
Yes, yes, I should.
You were asking Parker Harris questions from the community rather than yourself, which I really think boldly embodies everything that it means to be a leader in our ecosystem. A couple of those groups you mentioned, Rad Women. I had Blanca Leon Carter on the podcast previously. He's obviously a huge advocate of Rad Women Code and a coach and a mentor too. I understand that they've shaped your journey quite a lot as well.
Yeah, so I've been coaching for them for a while. Sometimes I do just more of the office hours, or sometimes I do one of the 10 weeks programs. But what I really love about the program is the ability to help with women admins who are looking to become developers. There's always been this notion of, well, you're either an admin or you're a developer, and there's seems to be this line where it's hard to cross over. And I think one, because Rad Women is all volunteer. And then two, there's so many people that are pouring in, whether they're doing coaching or whether they're doing the actual helping internally or sponsoring. It's such a great initiative. And I really love the idea and I love working with the organization.
Yeah, they're an inspiring group, and I think all the feedback that I ever see on social media from when I talk to people that have done the Rad Women course is always hyper positive, and they say how great the coaches are generally, and how much it's changed them, and there's that belief that they can do it is something that really shines through in their feedback, which is incredible. You mentioned there that you have folks in the ecosystem, women and men in the field that feel like they're either admins or they're developers or there's architects. For you, if we pull it back to your CTA journey, what do you think is the primary function of an architect and a CTA now in our space, with the blending across roles that we have these days?
Yeah, so for me, as I started on the journey and I think about CTA, it reminds me of a enterprise architect, someone who is very high level and they understand, a mile wide and just enough from a depth perspective to know about everything. But there's still a lot of people that you have to work with. So understanding end to end what the enterprise is looking for, being able to communicate with C levels, being able to also communicate with your tech leads and making sure that information is passed on, that overall blueprint of where you see your CRM transformation or your digital transformation going, I think is very important.
Yeah, can you speak to that engagement with executives and kind of C-suite then? Because typically that's not something that a lot of folks in Salesforce have exposure to until they get to those kind of stages. What's kind of been the biggest shift for you, I guess, when you've transitioned from developer to architect to CTA and that kind of stakeholder management piece?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is about communication and then understanding who you're communicating with. So, as an admin or as a developer, you may be talking to your overall group or you may be talking to your business users. Whereas when you start talking to C levels, typically they don't have a lot of time. Typically, they want high level, what's this meeting going to be about? And you need to communicate that very concise, very crisp, and that's something I learned a lot as I was, studying and preparing for the CTA. And I talk with a lot of C levels as well. But it's one of those things where you really need to understand what they're actually trying to get out of the meeting, and then also the concise points that you're bringing to the meeting so that either a decision can be made, information is being shared. It just really depends. But stakeholder management is key because an uninformed C level can cause, ripple effects through your project if they don't understand what's going on. But you can't get into the very technical weeds because it's something that they don't have the time, one, to comprehend, but also they just want to understand how is this going to fit in the overall picture that they're thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. That high level overview, I guess that communication of information succinctly is important in every facet of life. The less fluff, the more fluff that we can remove from every interaction, I guess, will make us all better communicators. Something that you've said said before when we've been chatting is that you're something of an introvert.
Yeah, I am.
And you now view this as your superpower. Um, tell me a little bit about that. I found that really interesting when you first mentioned that to me, and I think that's something that listeners would be really interested
Yeah, I
in.
tell everyone, like, when I'm out at a conference, like, this is my big energy that I'm bringing. So make sure we talk, make sure we chat. My resting state, my natural state is to have more like deeper one-on-one conversations. I'm not necessarily going to be that social butterfly that's 100 people in the room. I can be, but it's something that I like to say I'm introverted naturally, but at work, I'm an extrovert. Um, I'm a person that I think deeply. So when I say something, there's a lot of thought that has gone behind it. And I notice that as when I'm speaking with like other extroverts, they speak out loud what they're thinking. So you know exactly the whole picture of what they're trying to say because they're saying it as they're thinking and they're processing out loud. Whereas for me, I process internally. And then when I give you the answer, that's the answer, right? Like I've gone through, taken a lot of inputs. And especially with the CTA exam, I had to be very cognizant of I need to make sure the judges understand where my thought process is going. How did I get here with this solution? So that was something I was very aware of and working towards as I was doing my CTA journey as well.
That's really interesting. So the you had to make a conscious effort to explain your thought processes when that's something that you don't necessarily do. You formulate that all in your head and come out with the answer or the solution that you've been deep thinking about. How is you as an introvert, how do you, I guess, do people just understand that when you say something that they know that you've been thinking about this now, or is that something that for other introverts in the ecosystem you they can help, i guess convince is the wrong word, it's just like for them to be able to,
Again,
I've got an answer and this is my answer and know that I've been thinking about this deeply. It's not just like the first thing that's popped into my head.
yeah, and again, it depends on how well you know and who you're working with. So at work, I'm very much of I need to have a think about this. Sometimes I've already thought about the answer, but it's more of let me give time for depending on who I'm working with, right? So that they're understanding here are the pros, here's the cons, here's everything that I ran through. What am I missing? That's typically one of the things I'm trying to find out what information am I missing? Because, your judgment can be swayed based on wrong inputs or late information, like I call it, where it's not the most relevant in real time data. And so I think for other introverts, one of the things we do really well is we can take a lot of information and we can really sift through and understand concisely what is it that we want from that information. But what we need to always remember is that folks who are maybe processing out loud or don't understand that type of style to just communicate, we're thinking about it or here's the best solution. I always remember I had a manager who would say, you need to bring three choices. And in my mind, I was like, I'll bring one right one and two that we're not even going to talk about because in my mind, I'm going to tell you the pros and cons. Here's if we do nothing, here's the optimal solution, and then here's a suboptimal solution with all the things that we shouldn't do, right? But it's one of those things as you're going through and you're thinking internally, you really need to be able to express to people that one, you are thinking, two, you've taken all these inputs. And however you communicate that, sometimes it's maybe asynchronously where you send an email with, here's the high level of what I'm thinking, and then here's how I got here, right? Or it's more of when you're in a meeting, you really need to make sure that not every time somebody's going to call on you. So if you have something to say, raise your hand or look for a pause typically and then speak. I'm not a big person on when meetings are happening to speak for the sake of speaking. If I have something to add, I will add. If not, then, or if everything is good, I'm typically like, yep, that's good. I don't have anything to add here.
Yeah, it's is that a bit of advice for leadership then, or people managers, is to encourage that voice and as part of like those meetings or calls or what have you, to encourage those people to speak up. um
I would say yes, and to be aware. I feel that sometimes when we get to meetings, we're thinking about a lot of different things all at once, and to really be present in the meeting at that time and to listen to what you've heard, but what you've also not heard, the unspoken words, right? On
mm,
well, what really could happen if we don't do anything, right? Depending on who you're having the meeting with, you might have passionate people who are maybe dominating the meeting. That's something that you have to balance. Whereas you may have somebody who's like, I don't think this is the correct solution, or this is a suboptimal solution that's going to lead to XYZ. And I'm very upfront when something is suboptimal or something just is not quite right to speak up no, because it's going to be an issue later on. And I used to say I'm very good at hearing a system, especially when something is happening. So early in my career, I could almost predict when like systems would be having issues just because of what would be happening. And I remember at a previous job, I was like, in 6 months, we're going to start having these issues if we don't do something.
Mm,
And we didn't do anything. And then in 6 months, we started having issues. And, your role as you advance in your career, and for me as an architect, is whatever decision leadership takes is to support them, but then to also make sure that you have like a contingency plan. You're always trying to work towards getting to the best system possible, but the best system possible, it might not always be the optimal solution. It might be based on other factors, right? Financial or KPIs or different things that you're having to take into account. So, from a leadership perspective, yes, definitely listen to everyone that's in the meeting, listen to, take feedback from your skip levels, but also be present and aware when you're in that 20 minutes, be there for that 20 minutes and not, checked out, body present type thing.
yeah. Yeah, I think everybody's got an experience of that, and feeling that from a manager that isn't fully there and engaged. I remember in previous jobs that certainly happened to me as well. So I think that's super advice, super advice. Something that we've also spoken about as part of this journey, and whilst you're a deep thinker too, you've mentioned before that being a CTA at work has allowed you to visualize problems and hypothesize and test out theories. How does that work when you're like in the weeds, I guess?
Yeah, so for me, it's a very interesting thing. So it's almost like a picture in my head, but the picture wouldn't necessarily make sense if I try to explain it to you because it's very abstract things that I'm thinking about as the data is coming together. So it's one of those things as I'm getting all these different inputs, I'm doing these mind maps and trying to figure out paths that I need to go on. And then sometimes I have to, go back because the input has changed now. And so the underlying justification of what I was thinking wouldn't make sense. And I'm always trying to work towards what's optimal for my business and making sure that anything that we're doing, it's not going to cause technical debt or it's not going to cause a issue down the line that could have been fixed if someone spoke up. So I'm always trying to think of, okay, we're thinking of a solution now, but how does this hold up in the next few years, or what happens if something else is added?
Mm. And how do you personally balance testing theories and hypotheses about what might happen versus doing?
Yeah, so a lot of it is from previous experience. So when you've been in the Salesforce community for so long, you see a lot of things and everything kind of
You sure
has,
do.
I like to say these different types of patterns, right? Where if you do this, this, and this, you kind of start seeing this pattern and trend of where you're not wanting to go. Early on in Salesforce, I feel like as a developer, I used to break the entire platform because I would always be in R&D calls. I was good because I try to figure out high level. It's like a puzzle. I do the edges first. I try to figure out how far can I push the platform, and then we can fill in the middle. So, from a platform perspective, I know you can do a lot with Salesforce, but there's a lot of things you shouldn't do with Salesforce, which is good. And then as I'm thinking high level now from the entire enterprise, well, there are other systems that are added on and things that may do the job a bit better. And Salesforce isn't the entire ecosystem. There's so many other systems going on. So it's like putting a puzzle together.
Mm. Speaking of those other systems, like has has how is like moving up that ladder, I guess, that technical ladder in CTA and having a deeper understanding of enterprise architecture, how has that either changed or formulated new opinions for you of technology in general when you stack it up next to Salesforce, a space that we're so intimately familiar with? How what's your opinion on like the existing technologies that are out there that we are trying to embed into our enterprises?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I think every technology has its strengths and weaknesses. It's meant to do very specific things, and it's almost like a blank canvas. So, what that business or what that company is doing to make changes on that overall architecture of the technology, some things will fit, some things won't, and some things have to be customized. And that's where you have to really have a balance of, do you customize? Do you build? Do you buy? How can you add on to your overall enterprise when it comes to that type of technology? But overall, I'll say that, as I was studying for CTA and as I was learning about different technologies and how they fit into the overall ecosystem, they all have a purpose, and some have very particular purposes, while some can be a bit more broader, more malleable, and can be used for other things. And it's important to understand not just the high level capabilities of the platform, but overall the infrastructure, how it's going to work and how it's going to fit into your overall enterprise.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned again that the learning journey in CTA, and I'll try not to ask another loaded question here.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good.
um, but you mentioned that learning journey as well, and I'd be really interested to know, is there anything about that learning journey, or about becoming CTA, that has uh, had either unexpected or surprising outcome for you once you achieved it? You talk about learning a lot. Do you have the same approach to learning now, or has that changed, or is there any other aspects of getting that certification that have kind of altered the way you think about either the ecosystem in general, or your approach to learning methods?
Yeah, so for me, I think my learning style has changed. So I like to read a lot more. I like to just learn in general about not just Salesforce, but what else is out there? What other technologies are we integrating with or can be on that overall landscape? One of the things about CTA as well, though, is I really liked the studying aspect and going to the boards. And so one of the things I find myself not wanting to do right now is do multiple choice exams. I was looking back actually when we were talking earlier to see like what was the last exam I did, and it was a MuleSoft exam, the associate one. But since then, I've been reading a lot and I've been studying a lot, but I haven't sat down to do any multiple choice exams. And I think, at least for me, one of the things that I liked about the boards is that you are in front of three people presenting, and I do that a lot at work, where I'm presenting a lot. So sitting down and not having that like two-way communication has been kind of interesting. So I need to now shift back into doing these multiple choice exams again. But overall, I feel like my aptitude for learning has definitely changed, where it's something, even if I don't know it, it's of, oh, in enough time, I'll be able to understand it overarching. Or, I've studied so much about Salesforce now. When I look at other CRMs, I can see the trends, I can see the patterns, and I can see how they have their, good, their bad, and everything in between.
Mm.
So it's been very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I can see that. I think that so many of us thrive on that engagement and being able to express, and have that virtual, like, real time feedback. When, like, you're providing answers, and being able to have like a more informed discussion about it, more fruitful, I guess. Yeah, I'm not so hot on exams myself, so I kind of get into the room and I'm like, like, even with the multiple choice ones. But I think I perform far better in those face to face environments. So that's something I certainly resonate with. Um, as we kind of move towards the end of the episode here, for the listeners. We've mentioned a couple of groups already, and something that you mentioned when we were talking about being an introvert was not necessarily being a social butterfly. We're seeing Nadina in event mode. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna ask for some advice here. So, for anybody that might be new to the ecosystem, or even has been in the ecosystem for a while, how do you make the most of events and bring the social butterfly version of yourself out there? What can we do to make the most of those situations?
Yeah, so there's like a couple things. So I know there's an introvert group on the Trailblazer community that introverts can join. I've joined the group, but I haven't gone to any other things yet. There's also when you come to like say your first Dreamforce, there was a lot of on Twitter I knew and on LinkedIn where people were saying like if this is your first event, here are some groups that you can join, and there's a welcome party that typically happens. But for me, I would say go with knowing that it's going to be overwhelming at first, and like the whole ecosystem is really big and it can be overwhelming if you're getting into all the things really fast and you're not taking time to breathe. I always take very strategic breaks during these types of events, but I also try and find out before going what's some places that I can go, and what's some like groups that might be having like an event, or they might be having like an after hours Dreamforce, or like I went to the Amplified Breakfast this Dreamforce which I hadn't gone to before, where you one know ahead of time that it's going to be happening so you can see how you're feeling, but then also you have some pre-planned things. So it's not like you get there and you're completely lost. Having a buddy is always great too, or a small group, so that you can all travel together and have those different experiences, but you're also not alone. And also, the ecosystem is really friendly. So if you just put out on Twitter or LinkedIn that you're new, you're going to get so many people all at once.
Bombarded.
I think yeah, I think the hardest thing will be figuring out, well, who do you say hello to? Which is just be open to have conversations. Know that you're not going to be able to do every single thing when you go to things like Dreamforce. I know my first Dreamforce, I tried to do a lot, and I don't know if I accomplished a lot. But yeah, it's one of the things where the ecosystem is very welcoming, very open, and once you put your name out there, raise your hand, there'll be people who, like me, will say hi to you. And yeah,
Well, having you say hi to you is wonderful. You know, I'd certainly like if I was a newcomer, that would be a very warm and friendly face that I'd be very grateful for. So yeah,
yeah.
that's great advice. And I think for the most part, like on the whole, like all the new initiatives that Salesforce community team have done to make that environment welcoming has been amazing, and to have been played a small part in that as well personally has been really great. And there's lots of new friendly faces in the ecosystem, which is always wonderful. Um, second question, or a second piece of advice for the listeners. So folks that are thinking about journeys, and you can pull it back and give you a chance to talk about some of the groups that you mentioned. Maybe from your perspective, what if you are looking to kind of further knowledge or further your career and look at those groups? What's your advice for people looking for a path and sticking on that path with that support?
Yeah, so I would say, especially if you're like looking for groups and especially if you're an aspiring architect, one group I did want to bring up as well that I'm part of is Ladies Be Architect. And we're a volunteer group. And it's all about building confidence for all aspiring Salesforce architects and amplifying women and non binary voices. And we actually have a scholarship program that we just started to help from like a financial aspect for those who are aspiring in their career to maybe go for like their solution architecture or their technical architecture all the way up to the CTA exam. So it's definitely one of those things that you should check out from a perspective as well. And then overall, there's so many groups to get involved in that, again, there's a lot, but it's one of those things that as you're focusing on your career, maybe it's more of I'm going from admin to developer, then rad women would make sense for you. And then definitely if you're an aspiring architect, ladies be architect as well.
Well, there you have it. Those are the groups for where you folks are at in the ecosystem. Thank you, Nadina, for sharing that. One last question: is there any final pearls of wisdom, or anything that you would like to share on the podcast now with the listeners? If you could give them one piece of advice, what would it be from your perspective?
Stay curious. CTA is as much as the journey as the end result, and it's also a mindset shift. So the way you think as you go through that journey, or any big journey that you'll have, any big transformation, you always start at a very exciting part, and then you get into the kind of the middle, the valley of, oh, I don't know. And then at the end, it's like exciting, but be curious on the whole journey, enjoy your journey, whether it's CTA or if it's something else, and make sure that as you're going through these journeys, that you're also helping others.
Fantastic. Sage advice. Sage advice, Nadina. Nadina, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast and sharing your experience and sharing your insights. I think there's some super valuable pieces of information, especially from the intro for the introverts out there and those aspiring on that CTA journey. And I think there's plenty of things that are applicable from what you said that could be applied to all of us in all of our roles. As admins, developers, even myself in marketing, right? So I really value your input and your time. So thank you so much, and thank you for allowing me to have the social butterfly Nadina with me on the podcast today. I really value your time. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Jack.
You're very
It
welcome.
was a pleasure.
Thank you. Listeners, thank you so much for listening to this episode of DevOps Diaries with Nadina Lisbon. If you'd like to check out more episodes, you can do so in all the places that you get your podcasts or at gearset.com/DevOps podcast. I will catch you on another episode sometime soon. And Nadina, thanks once again.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.